There we go. I'm going to stream our little class this time just to, I hope this is going to work. We'll find out. Like I said, COVID time. So if you run into a jam and you have to stay home or something's happening, I'm going to try my best to still give you the class and not say good luck, read the textbook. So long, sucker. So doing my best is streaming through really YouTube. I don't like doing Zoom stuff, mainly because I did some Zoom stuff way before COVID. And we had a class, and there was a guy in class, and he was eating cereal in his bed during class, and he forgot he was on camera. Also, he was naked. So I would rather just stream out instead of having to get that back. So I'm going to try. So if you're there, let us know. Look at it. It should be in a chat thing. But if not, we're trying. Okay. So what is surplus? We're going to go through this stuff pretty fast today. Like I said, the textbook is for you to read it and really go through it. I want to spend some time going through a little exam review also, because people freak out about graphs. So I'm going to spend some time looking at graphs. Remember, I told you there isn't going to be a lot of math on the exam, but I lied. There is a question that deals with math. And we're going to walk through that exact question. One thing about the exam. When I was in law school, there was a student who never came to class. He was an idiot. He was just a complete moron. And he had a summer internship at Fulbright Jaworski in Houston, and he got paid as a summer intern. I think it was about $5,000 a week in law school. And I said, how can this be? Because you are truly an idiot. How can you have, I was working for a legal aid clinic to help people. I said, you are truly an idiot. How can you have this job? And you never come to class, you don't know anything, you're not prepared, and you cheat all the time. He said, well, my mother is a partner. So I said, well, one day you're going to be the governor of Texas. That's obviously how politics works. Well, what happened, though, later on, he was coming to me for work. So I was a boss at a company. I was spending a lot of money on lawyers, and he came and pitched their services. I said, you don't remember me, do you? We were in law school together, and I thought you were an idiot. And I still think you're an idiot. So I'm not going to give you the work. He said, but sir, what can we do? And I said, you're calling me sir, and you cheated on tests. You did this. So point of the story is, don't cheat. There's 100 questions on the test. You don't have a lot of time. And I'm using a lot of the questions from the publisher. So you could go online and find them. You can go to Chegg, you do all that stuff. And the point of the kind of questions that I have in the test is not to give your life, it's not to give you heartache. The point is so you can think through these things that we've discussed. And so if you just kind of rip yourself off, you're just ripping yourself off. And it doesn't do much to me except wasting our time. But I do several things for you guys in the class. More than likely, I'll curve the test grade. The test grade, if you remember the production possibilities frontier, we're going to talk a little more about that on a review. That's how I curve. Everything in class is real. So I do the real thing for your test. And I'll explain the math how I do it too. That just means if you blow the test and you get like a 10 out of 100, you will get a better result from the curve than if you got a 95. You might get a fraction of a point on the curve if you get a 95, but if you get really low, you get a bunch of points to ease up. So this is different. In law school, for example, a curve is if we had a class and you all got 95s on the test, but one person got a 94, that person failed. That's the law school curve. That's a bell curve. I don't do that. There's no reason to do that. So we'll go through the review. I just want you all to understand this because these concepts are important into your actual life. And if you're going to go into the world and if you're going to go into business, you got to do these things. It's important to kind of understand this base stuff. That said, we're going to blow through some of this pretty quick today because we have 2 chapters we haven't talked about. And I really want you guys to talk to me if you need to. And then we'll do the review. And I want to spend a decent 20 minutes or so on that part. Okay? So buckle up because here we go. If it goes fast, stop. Say, wait, stop. What? All right? We're going to talk about these things. What is surplus And how do markets become efficient? In general terms, it's pretty fair to say, and we're going to talk about deadweight loss here in a minute, that markets all by themselves work really efficiently. That does not mean they're fair. It's a big difference. Markets are not fair. And economists worry about fairness, but we worry about efficiency. But in our sake, the market equilibrium, supply and demand, is all about efficiency, not about fairness. Two different things. Okay, we're going to cover a lot of this business now. So welfare economics, it's really just how we allocate for the economic well-being. Welfare has a bad connotation right now as a word. So we're not using the word to say people on welfare, people who aren't, whatever people define it. What we're talking about is the general well-being of everybody in the economy. And we have two measures of this kind of value. Okay, there's consumer surplus, and then there's producer surplus. And so this is out of your textbook. So we've got Ron, Leslie, and Donna, and they're going to enroll in a class, and they're willing to pay a certain amount of money. So this WTP, or willingness to pay, is how much they'll pay, but different people are willing to pay different amounts for the same thing. So here in this graph, right out of your textbook, they're willing to pay this much money. What happens is, we look at this and we say, okay, how do we know who's going to pay what at what level? Now, I'm going through this pretty quick because I know this is the question. So if I know Ron is willing to pay $200, but really the value is of a certain rate, then he gets a kind of a benefit from that. We call that the consumer surplus. It's much easier to understand this. We can look at the math, but it's much easier to understand it this way. So this is a demand curve. And remember, I said that we love curves, even though the curve looks stair-stepping this way. And it's stair-stepping because we're going to have different people on the willingness to pay here. So the price on the left-hand side, so that's Ron's willingness to pay. At $200, Leslie and Donna. But if we say that the price is $175, this is our, say for example, the price of the textbook is $175, but Ron is willing to pay $200. His surplus is $25. It's just the difference between what he's thinking he's going to pay and he's cool with it versus what it really costs. You guys have seen this before. You go into a store and there's something on sale. You say, "Wow, I was expecting to pay this much money. It's on sale. Woohoo!" That's your surplus. Now, that doesn't mean, and this is important, that doesn't mean you get a rebate. It doesn't mean something comes back to you. We just consider economics to be the consumer surplus overall based on what you were willing to pay at the beginning. That's it. So here, this surplus, this is Leslie's surplus of what she was expecting to pay. Let me go backward. I had an animation in here. All right. So, and these three things, Ron's willing to pay, Leslie's willing to pay, Donna's willing to pay, and this is the willingness where they are, and that's how we calculate the surplus. And of course, if you roll the plane and the thing is zero, then you're thinking you got a really good deal. I'll give you a hand. So it's the differential between these things that's important. Okay. The same thing goes the other way around. That if we have a couple of people and they're selling something, in this case it's the tutoring business, it's the willingness to sell. It's the same thing except the other direction. So if students will tutor, the market price is $25 an hour, then we know that the willingness to sell is going to be lower than the market price, and they're going to hit the market. So we can graph that the same way that we just looked at a second ago. So it's going to be the differential, and here it is. The PS is producer surplus. I zipped through this before, but it said CS. Same calculation, but here it's $25, which is the market price minus 20, so there's a producer surplus of $5. And here it's 15. And all that means is the market is holding a certain value, and you as a producer are going to sell below that value, and so you get that surplus in between. So it looks like this. Of course, we know that is a supply issue. The supply curve will go up. And I'm going to say this a little bit later, but this is a if you remember some of the Florida math, this is a positive slope, and this is a negative slope. So we'll look at that here in a second and what the numbers mean.
So are also the producer surpluses, are they all positive?
So the producer supply curve should be a positive slope. Yeah. I want to answer the surplus question here coming up in a second because there's a little depth in that. If the supply slope becomes negative, you really need to redo your business because you're about to go bankrupt. So, and it's a really good way if you're running a business. It's making a graph like that is an excellent way of understanding the relationship and seeing the future in your forecasting. Those of you who are going to be accountants in here will disagree with that. You'll look at the spreadsheet numbers and say, no, I can tell you the numbers right here. But monkey's a little brain, we like little pictures, so you can see it. And we just glance at it really fast. And if you've ever been in a meeting with executives who run companies, you know that when I say monkey's a little brain, those are the guys running companies. So I forget that we're live streaming. Never mind that. My friends who are CEOs. Just had long conversations with those guys last night. All right. So what happens in general, it's the same thing, it's just inverted. The willingness to sell, and you can see how it stair steps. The important part about all this stuff is, as we look at the surplus, and we look at it graphically, it's going to start fitting this theme. And this theme, I'll come back, is just like we saw on the consumer surplus, it's fitting into this section of triangle. Believe it or not, mathematically, this makes a lot of sense. We won't break down all that math in here. We don't really need to. We're going to get close here in a minute on the review. But what happens is this business about the demand curve and the height and the supply curve. So the height of the demand curve at any quantity can be thought of as, what do you think? So at the very top of the demand curve, at any quantity at all, that's the, what do you think? What might be the answer? Oh yeah, let me hit the arrow and it will highlight it for you. So, yeah, so remember, the other way, at the height, then you say inverted the height of the, what's the other curve? So we have the demand curve and the supply. Right. So the height of the supply curve would show the, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So how do we measure the social welfare in general when we talk about this as terminology? Well, we do this by adding the consumer surplus and the producer surplus, and this is the important part. So these are all the gains that both parties get from the market. And the reason why it's important is because we're going to run into a thing about taxes and incidents coming up where it's going to destroy some of those gains. So this is how we maximize what we're getting out of the market, and that's why the equilibrium point's important. We maximize the total social surplus for everybody's happy without government intervention. So every time I get into this whole government intervention part, people think, oh, you're a crazy person who doesn't like libraries. No, that's not it. Government intervention in market dynamics just means that if I came here with a candy bar and I said, who wants to buy this candy bar? And we did a Dutch auction, for example. A Dutch auction works like this. I had a candy bar, and I said, this candy bar is for sale for $100, $99, $98, $97, $95, and I keep going until I hit one number, and one of you says, I'll do it. And that's the Dutch auction. So,
And then it's over. There's no other bidding.
That's
it's going down.
That's right. That's it. So then if you say, okay, $22, so it's sold $22, but then if somebody comes in from the city of Amarillo and says, hello, I'm from, and they come away with fairy wings, and they show up, I'm from the city of Amarillo, and now you must pay the drainage fee. And the drainage fee is 25% of that transaction. Secondly, we have this, and that's called deadweight loss. That's a tax. And that is inefficient in that market that we just did in that Dutch auction because we had no other interference. Regardless of what taxes do, in the marketplace transaction, that's what I need. Now, we can talk about the value, and we'll talk about that later on. We get into GDP about the value of taxation and what it means and what we spend money on. But for now, that's what I'm talking about. So when we allocate all of our resources, we're maximized, and it looks like this. And this is the part I really want to get to. So we know demand, supply, the big X. We know equilibrium. We've talked about that. We know what excess supply is and excess demand is, or shortages exist. We've already gone through that stuff. And by now, as you read in your textbook, we don't need to have numbers, we just know our prices and our quantity demanded. So inside of here, if we look at, for example, in an equilibrium price of $4 to get to our point here, this triangle right here is all consumer surplus. That's the stair step I just showed you. And it all fits above the equilibrium point, all of this right here. So what people are expecting to pay, I'm expecting to pay $7, and really it's $4, then my consumer surplus is all of this area right here, this little rectangle. Or if I'm expecting to pay $5, and the surplus is $4, my surplus is here. And over all these infinite points of people, it creates this triangle right here. And this in itself is what the surplus is. And how we show it, I should say it that way. Now, on the other side is the producer surplus, and that fits below the equilibrium point, right here. So producers, and it should start to make sense if you're just thinking in general terms of numbers, but regardless of what the prices are. Saying, okay, if I'm expecting to produce something, and the market has it at $4, and I'm producing at $2.50, and this is what I'm supplying at C, my surplus exists here. So everyone kind of get that as a concept? All right. So this little area right here is an interesting spot of what will happen pretty soon when we get some kind of interruption in the marketplace, and that deals with taxation. So first, why do we pay taxes? And in general terms, you guys know why we pay taxes, for our corrupt elected officials to live forever eating caviar off of naked bodies. That's how taxes go. Everybody knows that. No!
I learned that in the street smart class.
That's right. Why do we pay taxes? What do we do?
We don't really get a choice.
Okay. We don't get a choice, but we do it, but there is a why.
It's like the food stamps.
Okay, food stamps. Okay, so there's redistribution of wealth. Okay, so let's talk about government. These are parts of government spending, food stamps.
So like public funds don't have to be paid for by private companies or
baseball.
government.
So water, right? Amarillo, Texas water is one of those, right? It's called an enterprise fund. So run by the municipality of Amarillo. So that's a really good example of that kind of commodity. It's a good word for that. You guys ever drive too fast around? Someone pulls you over? It's not your neighbor, is it? Maybe. But it's somebody who has authority to pull you over. That we give them authority.
VA benefits?
Yeah. Federal stuff is VA benefits, right? We pay for that. But at the local level, who are those guys called?
Cops.
Yeah, the cops, the police, the popo. The guys, the popo. I've watched The Wire. I know. The Wire, no, nothing. You guys not watch The Wire?
Yeah.
One of the most amazing television shows in the history of moving pictures. Anyway, So we pay for, military VA benefits. We pay the infrastructure, our roads. You jump on I-40, you don't have to pay a toll for that anymore. Go to libraries, do all that kind of stuff. So that's the social welfare.
Stadiums.
Who said that? Yes. That will get me. That's going to take me down a dark road. Because we do invest in things that we think provide an economic benefit, but they don't. And so, okay, I'll put it this way. The post office. The post office is a service. Ben Franklin was the first postmaster general. It's a service for us, and it's in the Constitution. And people say the post office loses billions of dollars a year. So how much does the military lose every year? Well, the military, we don't talk about the military losing money. It's not a profitable enterprise, but it is a service. So why do we call the post office the same thing? So when we think about services that the government does, we frame things in different ways, depending on political agendas. I have a political agenda in savings because they don't, we'll talk about later. They don't do what we think. They've never done what we think. There is not one example that exists anywhere that does what we think, that we convince ourselves of.
Pretty heated up.
There are other ways of spending public money that do things, that build up infrastructure. And then, in Amarillo, Texas, we have companies that don't come here. They look, and then they go to love it. And why are they going to love it? Why do you guys think?
They had a stadium thing.
Is that loud? they have a stadium thing. They have better infrastructure. The roads are falling apart. So a lot of companies come here and they think that your roads are crappy. Or other things. We still have wooden sewer systems and dividends in neighborhoods that we haven't fixed. Yeah. So there's a pipeline that goes into northeast Amarillo where a lot of industrial stuff is. Actually, where the hospitals are, that part of town, there's a sewer pipeline that's only 12 inches, and it can't handle the building that we're doing out there. So over time, there's going to be a lot of poop, right? So we haven't built the infrastructure for it. So we invest in other things. But these are policy questions that economics help us determine. I'm interested in what is the economic output of different investments that we do. So the economics around a brand new overpass don't exist, except transportation, trucks, all that stuff. But it doesn't pay back. But you need it because for the past 10 years or so, and that's why all the bridges on I-40, we're fixing them. All the bridges from Eastern Street all the way.
Now we're fixing them.
Well, it's a tech stop thing, right? When I was in the city council, I was yelling about this. Every bridge from Eastern, down I-40, from Eastern to Sonsi are not rated to hold 18-wheeler traffic. None of them. So now they're finally trying to fix them. Otherwise, TxDOT would say you can't run traffic like that over these bridges, and all that traffic routes around town, and then I-40 becomes a death corridor. And that's where the money is for Amarillo, is I-40. So those are the long-term, bigger investments. We'll talk about stadiums later on a little more in the issues here. You guys might love stadiums, which is okay, fine, I'm cool. It's just the question of what is the greatest for the social benefit based on the dead weight. And that's what we're going to get to. So why do we pay them? There are different types of taxes. Excise taxes, you guys, excise taxes are taxes on a particular good or a service. So we tax gas, we tax cigarettes quite a bit. And this gets into this thing that we talk about in microeconomics quite a bit, which is elasticity of demand and supply. And there's a little bit in the text about this here. Don't worry too much about that. But cigarettes, governmental entities tax cigarettes pretty heavy versus something like broccoli. Why do you think that is? Why would a taxing entity put more taxes on cigarettes than broccoli?
A lot of people
It's not good for you.
It's not good for you?
They want you to quit.
Oh.
People, if it's more expensive, people are oh, they won't buy as much.
Okay.
a lot of people smoke.
A lot of people smoke.
It's more business.
I want to come back to that. Hold that.
Are they actually taxing like the companies, not necessarily trying to tax the consumers, but it's passed along to the consumers so the companies don't have to pay it?
There's a pass-through on that. Yeah, there are certain issues. If the gas pump, for example, it's a direct tax right there. So I have an electric car, so I don't pay that tax because I don't get gas. I should pay my fair share to drive on the roads. But now the state is saying, hey, if you have an electric car, if you have a Tesla or something, you need to pay a big fee every year. Really, the equity is how much do I drive on the road? It should be based on my mileage. I think that's a little more fair because you get these giant, big 18-wheeler trucks. So you've seen them on the Texas turnarounds we have, the little loopy things. So we spend a lot of money on making those pretty. Put little brick sidewalks and stuff. Then giant trucks come up, they make a turn, 2 trucks, and they're all crushed and everything is broken. So that's your tax money, then we go back and repair it.
I don't want semis.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's just get on a bicycle and yeah. But I want to come back to when you said a lot of people smoke. Somebody else was about to say something. Yes.
Maybe you said like smoking is so addictive, people will keep smoking no matter what. But like with broccoli, like if the tax on broccoli is really high, or not.
Yes, this is the key to this triangle of advice right here. So a lot of people smoke, and they do it because there's an addictive quality to it. But if you're an economist, for the government sitting around saying, what should we do? What should we do? There's a social good of having people not smoke because people who smoke is not healthy, but it's a burden on the health system. So they go to the hospital, costs a lot of money in insurance. A lot of people go to the emergency room. A lot of people don't have insurance. When they go to the emergency room, the taxpayers, pick up the bill for a lot of that. So that's it's not a social good because that's a lot of dead weight. So if you're an economist of the government, you think, well, what do we do? Well, we could do something that discourages, make a negative incentive, right? Like you're saying, it's not healthy. But really, it's because the elasticity of demand, which is our economic term, that just means there's more demand or less demand based on price changes. If the price changes on cigarettes, people still buy them. If the price changes on meth, people still buy it. Price changes on gas, people still buy it. What people do instead, they sell giant, so the Hummer, you know that car, the Hummer? Yeah. When gas prices went through the roof, people sold their Hummers, and that company kind of went out of business. It was sold to a Chinese company based on gas prices. Gas prices go down, people buy a lot of SUVs. They still buy gas. They don't stop. They're just buying a different part of transportation, which gets us to what we talked about last time, that people in times of economic crisis, the last thing they pay off is their car payment because they need that car. So prices can go up, but people will still buy gasoline and people still buy cigarettes because it's an addictive quality or there's something they need. Pharmaceuticals, medication, heart medication for people, they still need to buy it or they're going to die. So that's how you get into trouble. People jack up the prices. There are a lot of stories about people really messing with the market. It's not a free market then. They just jack it up because they know you will pay. So suppose the government pays this excise tax. I know who pays, which is what we were just talking about. Is it the producer? Is it set off? Normally producers never want to pay anything. That's the producer surplus. So they put it on you and it reduces your consumer surplus. But that reduction is what I'm about to show you how we graph that. So it looks like this. We come here, it shifts the curve. So what happens is there's $1 tax on milk. Without it, it's here. The price buyers pay and sellers. This is assuming there's like a split of 50-50 at the equilibrium point here. So it shifts that burden down. So what happens is, and it's the same thing, tax on sellers. Okay, so if the tax is implemented certain ways, but regardless, what happens is tax hurts both buyers and sellers because it's an added fee inside of the market transaction, and you're thinking, why do I have to do that? So either buyers pay or sellers receive a lower price, either way. But this, what we get to is called deadweight loss, and this is the thing I'm trying to drive to. So deadweight loss looks like this. It's this little triangle here. So what happens, So when you read your textbook, I just want to try to clarify parts of this so it's not too overwhelming and confusing. You got equilibrium point 1 here. Then this shifts to equilibrium point 2. This area here, there is no social surplus. It disappears. The value, that we can calculate the entire value based on the area of the triangle, it's gone. So the quantity demanded moves from 1,000 to 750 because the price, right? Equilibrium point shifts down here. So now we have the sellers receive at 350 is at equilibrium. Fewer gallons of milk demanded. So what happened to that value? Disappears. That's what's called dead weight. So I'm going to go the elasticity of demand, but it's really, it works like when things are perfectly elastic, and that's stuff we're not going to really have to get into in this class, but when you see it in the textbook, you kind of understand. I'm not going to ask you questions about elasticity on the exam. I'm trying to remember, double check in my small mind, but I don't care about this part with you guys right now. All this matters is, and all of this stuff, when we look at what the tax incidence is, when we tax cigarettes, there is deadweight loss coming in because you will pay the tax. Because you're going to buy it. That's why we don't tax Brussels sprouts too much. And then there's also the social good that we're talking about. So when it's somewhat elastic, which means perfectly elastic, somewhat elastic, just means the demand isn't so sensitive to price changes that we just talked about a second ago, pharmaceuticals, things like that. So, and a lot of that deals with, I'm just going to cut through this stuff. A lot of that deals with substitutions, yes.
Like how you tax cigarettes a lot, so they do the same like with alcohol and stuff like that, or?
Yeah. So let's go the opposite side, from alcohol to tax-free day at the beginning of school. So tax-free holiday, go buy stuff, and people rush out because they're thinking they're getting a discount. Well, really, you're not. You're just paying the market price. There's just no deadweight loss on the tax. So it's a lot different than a clearance sale that has a tax associated with it. Even though they might come out to be the same thing as far as how much money you're paying, it's different in the calculation we have for the social good. This has a lot of stuff that deals with how we deal with policy considerations and all that kind of good stuff that happens both at the state level, actually at the local level too. So deadweight loss is surplus is transferred from producers to consumers and given to who? So if deadweight loss is a surplus, remember that triangle, I'm taking the surplus out of that little triangle, and I'm transferring it from producers or consumers, because it inhabits that same area. Who am I transferring it to? Oh, no.
Competitors.
Nobody. It disappears. Now, I know you're thinking, wait a minute, the government gets the revenue, and they spend it on stuff, and that spending goes and all that kind of stuff. So think about just the market transaction instead of that bigger issue about the government taking the tax money. I have a candy bar, and it's $1, and you're going to buy it for $1, and then somebody from Amarillo comes in saying, here's a 25% tax. So now you give me $1, you spend $1.25. I still get $1. You get the candy bar. That 25 cents goes nowhere. It in the transaction of between you and me.
Within the market.
Yes, exactly. That's right. That's the distinction. So yes, the government gets the 25 cents to spend it on stuff, but in the market transactions, nobody. Does everyone understand that? It's a little philosophically weird because it's still money transferred, but okay, we don't care about that. Okay, so this is if the government increases the tax, there's a trade-off, of course, and all this deadweight loss. So what happens is, this is a good example of 15-cent taxes on bags, but what happens is you get the supply curve and it shifts. The tax revenue exists here, and the deadweight loss always exists in this triangle. And so That's how this stuff works. Just in the transaction, it makes things disappear. Okay. There's a huge deadweight loss if the tax is very extreme. And a lot of people will say, this is the example of, oh, Lovey, I just bought a new yacht for $500 million with a tax of $500 million. None of us can relate to that except Jeff Bezos. So the deadweight loss is pretty much 100% because that money is just gone in the market transaction. And if you have not seen Jeff Bezos' new yacht, you have missed out. Have you seen it? It's the size of Crete, the island. The size of Australia. It's the size of Jupiter. It keeps getting bigger. Okay.
Would you love to have a yacht?
No. There's an axiom that says the best day in a person's life is when they buy a boat, and the second best day in a person's life is when they sell that boat. That's now it's a sad thing to say because that skips having kids and getting married and like opening up your speed racer model that you got when you were in 8th grade. Sorry, memories. So speed race. I don't know where that came from. Okay, so let's talk about this real fast. This is interesting, and then we're going to jam into the other parts. You're going to run out of time. So this one. England passed a tax in 1696 on windows on homes. This actually happened in Amsterdam as well. Because the idea was, if you were really wealthy, you had more windows. Because windows were expensive. Windows were lead, and they're tough to make, and very, very pricey. So if you owned a house that had a lot of windows, you had a lot of money. So what England did is they said, the more windows you have, the more tax you pay. But what do you think people did? What's that?
No windows.
Yeah, so, well, they had windows in their houses. So what?
Or boarded them up.
They did. Yeah, they didn't cardboard them, but they bricked them up. So now if you go into Amsterdam or if you go into England, you see some old house, you think, there are no windows on those houses because they don't want to pay the tax. So that is a longer story about how it gets into Mrs. Havisham and Great Expectations and how she, I don't know if you remember the story, but she was really ghostly white because she lacked vitamin C. She never went to the sun. She didn't have any windows in her house, and she was really wealthy. That's the whole part of that story. And Dickens. Have you ever read Dickens in here?
For instance, my dad's ones.
Okay. That's okay. It's just truly excellent. Wonderful.
But some discipline.
What is life but it's a series of disappointments? Have you read James Joyce and Araby, the greatest short story ever written? Yeah? Okay. I'm going to start weeping? Okay. All right. So the gist, unregulated markets are beneficial because it gives you the greatest surplus. That doesn't mean unregulated markets are the fairest. They're just the most efficient. The big thing I'll stress. If you had unregulated markets all the time, then we end up people selling kidneys in the back of alleys and all that kind of business, right? And it's illegal to sell body parts. We regulate those things for certain things. So a lot of people would argue we should sell, we should have an unregulated market on body parts. It should be perfectly fine. People know what they're getting into in transactions. But do you really know what you're getting into? How many of you read the terms of service when you download a new thing of software? Right. So anyway, but on the other side, on the far end of that, on the social benefit, is what China just did 2 days ago. China just made a whole law that said if you're a kid, you're not allowed to play video games during the regular day. You can play for an hour, I think, on the weekends.
Yeah, I just saw it.
Yeah.
They already had a time limit.
Yeah, but now it's really severe. Like an hour on the weekend and an hour on a holiday or something. So what they're doing is they're saying to the internet service providers, if you cannot stream this stuff or have these games or IP addresses, they're not just saying this is the law, we'll look the other way. Like here, it's kind of like you have to wear a seatbelt. Don't text while you're driving, okay? It's a good law because there's so many accidents that happen when people texting while they're driving. They drive down the street. I was on my bicycle. It was last week. Someone else blow through a stop sign, texting while she's driving, and almost hit me. I said, "What? She goes, oh, sorry. Yeah. So in China, though, they're serious. They're locking it down to the internet service provider. They're gonna force it.
You really think that's gonna like work? I just don't see that. That's crazy. I didn't even believe that.
It will work in China.
I feel
So
like it would work because you have less kids on.
yeah, but you got to think in Chinese ways. So in the United States, we pretty much have open market, right? The internet, get on stuff. You're sitting here in class, and I don't know if you're looking at econ, you're looking at naked pictures of people in tutus or what. You can't be naked and be in a tutu. I don't know. See, obviously, I'm going into the world. I don't even know what I'm talking about. But I don't know. But in China, they lock it down. The technology's locked down. Yes. So when I was in China, I ran a VPN. It was doubling. One of my patents is on double encryption, so I made my own stuff. But I ran a VPN through a satellite connection, all this kind of stuff, routed my signal all over the place, and still they were trying to track what I was doing. I was just a guy in a hotel in Hong Kong. And that wasn't even real China. I mean, Hong Kong at that time was it's called two systems, one government. Now it's changed. That's
China like a
communist country. So in terms of politics, there is no such thing as a pure communist country, and there's no such thing as a pure socialist country. There's no such thing as a pure capitalist country. They don't exist. So we can say the United States is a capitalist country. Everything, like I said, drive on the freeway. And we share the costs. Go to the library, the VA, we share these costs. So there's no such thing as one pure system. In China, a communist country, in a sense, some of the wealthiest people in the world live in China. And they have their own companies in China, and they're private companies. So Baidu,
Just because in China, their money's more not valuable on the island.
so we're going to talk about what the value of money is coming up, but there's a thing called the reserve currency of the world, which is the dollar right now. It's getting close to not being the reserve currency. And if we putz around too much more with debt, then the yen, which is the Chinese currency, could be the reserve currency of the world, or the euro could be. So it's not that it's not as valuable. Currency trades like any other thing, any other commodity. People buy dollars, they trade euros, they do back all the time. There are times we want the dollar to be strong, and times we want the dollar to be weak. That doesn't mean weak as in don't beat me up. That just means we want to be able to have the dollar. We want to have more euros by fewer dollars, or sometimes more dollars by fewer euros, depending on what we want to trade. So you can, if you live in Spain and you want to come to Disney World, you want to make sure €1 is equal to like $2, so it's a weaker dollar, because you want to get more value of your euro. So we want people to come from Spain to spend all their money in Disney World if we're in an economic recession. There are other times when we don't want that we want our dollar to buy more so we can do more stuff in trade. So it's a lot of complexity in that question. But the fact is that China is a communist country in the sense that the communist regime operates the economy very tightly. But you know what? So does the Federal Reserve in the United States. And the Federal Reserve changes interest rates, and that determines how much you borrow from a bank and how much the banks have in reserve. And we're going to talk all about that in this semester. The important thing is there isn't one pure system. They don't exist. As much as, like I said, your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving will yell at you and say that, doesn't exist. They're all shades and gradations of stuff. It just depends on how we hold things accountable. The important thing is you can't be, if you have a business idea, if you're in this class and you have a business idea and you want to go in the world and build it, super. But the United States is probably 15th or 18th, I can't remember the number now, on entrepreneurial freedom of building new companies.
Wow.
I think Singapore's number one. So here, there's a lot of stuff you got to do. You set up a company in Powder County, you instantly get a tax notification before you even sell a thing. They say, hey, we're watching, we're waiting for our taxes. I mean, that's pretty quick what happens.
Wow.
So part of this class is we just look at the data and understand the world and the evidence. We don't fall for stuff that isn't true. But there isn't Cuba, I guess, was as close to like communism as like state-owned property. Maybe some places in Indonesia.
Isn't Cuba like bad out there?
bad dozen.
Like the economic view, but also like, you know, the poor
So,
environment that they have out there.
just as an aside, Cuba, I've never been to Cuba. You can go to Cuba now if you want to. There are exceptions to travel to Cuba. Cuba hasn't, Cuba's the one place in the world that you can go to get old car equipment for cars in the 50s, because that's the only cars they have there right now. So if you have old motors you have to get, Cuba is the export king for that stuff. That's what people still driving. But what happened was when Fidel Castro died, Hilton, all these places bought property in Cuba. So they're ready to build giant hotels as soon as the current regime kind of goes out. And there's a new market-oriented regime that comes in. They're ready to build. They just don't want to build it yet because in all of this, it's about corruption. Communism is particularly bad on that, really bad. In totalitarian regimes and everything, corruption is very, very bad. And that is, talk about deadweight loss. Oh, man, you deal with corruption, you got to pay off people to do things. That's 1,000% deadweight loss. Nothing contributes on the market valuation of that.
Contributes to people who don't want.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that I personally don't like. Corruption and totalitarian people telling you what to do and all this stuff because people stealing. I don't like that. So yeah, it could keep you alive, but at the same time, I think that's what you really fight, so if you can. All right. Okay, so that's good. That was fast. We got to go even faster when we talk about this, which we can because a lot of the stuff that we've just discussed. Let me go back to our. Hey, look at that! All right, that's exciting. It's working. And like I said, I'm really gonna try hard for you guys. If something happens with COVID stuff, so you still be part of the class. And that's not what the college is mandating us to do. I just did it because you guys. It's not fair if your hub is being stuck and you need to be home or get sick or something. So I'll try my best. It might not be optimal, but I'll try.
So are we able to live stream that right now and watch class?
Well, today,
Just today?
one of your peer students has to be at home to stay away from you so she doesn't make you sick. So that's very, very kind and considerate of her. And so I'm trying to do the best I can. This is not an internet class, and I'm not streaming and talking to you guys, so please come if you can. But I also know how exceptional it is, so I'm just trying my best. Trying. So please, when it comes time for reviews or when you go to rate my professor, you don't have to do anything, but $100 under the table. I didn't say that. I did say it. I didn't mean it. But no, I didn't.
This is all on record.
If I'm going to sell it for $100, I have failed in my life. Oh, yeah, if we're talking $110, my willingness to sell.
Well, $10 is
That's right. Okay, real quick, we know our surplus. So we're going to talk about price ceilings here real quick. So there are times when a government can step in, and most of this conversation is about the government, and says, I'm going to set certain levels of prices that you have to deal with. So a price floor is the legal minimum price. Minimum wage is a good example of this kind of stuff. So, but a lot of times it's either non-binding, binding, and then have these long-run effects over time. And the price ceiling is the maximum price. So just picture it as, here we go. Just picture it as the floor that you're standing on, and the ceiling is above you. Really simple. So we put these price controls on things because people do manipulate the market. So we talked about this before. Market manipulation happens all the time. So bad actors get involved and they say, okay, what if we work together and we collude or we do something or we stop a supply? So a good example of this is the cartel that exists in the Middle East. And they're called a cartel which isn't a bad, we use that word kind of on current popular culture, the drug cartel and stuff. But the cartel release is the official language that they use, which is they sit there, OPEC is what's called, and they manipulate prices to change the market. So they do that. Now the government comes back in and tries to regulate it by saying we're going to buy a bunch of oil and put it into reserves. So if OPEC says the price is going to go up, or they don't say the price is going to go up, they say we're going to produce less. So they produce less, the market price goes up, our supply and demand. So the government says, well, okay, we're going to release some of the oil from the reserve, so then there's a bigger supply, and then the price will stabilize. So that's how we manipulate the market on things. Okay. Question?
But you know how like the Taliban is taking over Afghanistan right there, where we usually get oil from them? I mean gas, oil or something like that.
I don't know how much
Are we no
oil
longer?
we get from Afghanistan, but
See, like I know, like we withdraw from there.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to ask about like the oil as well.
I don't know that. I don't think there's a market in oil out of Afghanistan. I think there's a huge market for poppy and opium. Let's talk about that real quick. The
I'm
Taliban.
just saying because like the Taliban, like you know, they took over. I forgot how you say it. Kabul? Like since the K. It's the
Problem.
Oh, the capital, Kabul.
yeah, Kabul.
So, what were you saying?
No, I was replying to that question.
Yeah.
I was asking about the oil. I was saying that's the Taliban.
So let me talk real quick. I mean, like 2 seconds on this, on market manipulation, because it's important. Regardless, the oil, we export a lot of oil these days. The import of oil really to us comes out of Canada, the Middle East, some Russia, a lot from South America. But we find that when oil prices collapse, these governments start collapsing because the governments Alaska does this as a state. The state of Alaska gives every citizen a bonus check at the end
Just for living there.
just for living there, right? It comes out of oil reserves. When the price,
Jet ski. Or not jet ski, sorry. Ski, on the stove.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Let me go to Alaska.
That happened. Like,
Okay.
if you moved there, not if you already lived there.
Okay. But what happens when the price of oil craters, then the state of Alaska says, uh-oh, and then people get mad saying, and where's my money? And they can't afford it. This is all based on oil prices. In Amarillo, Texas, there's a very wealthy family, and they would donate to a lot of nonprofits. Their family was all invested in oil. Oil collapsed, nonprofits didn't get the donations, and then nonprofits started failing because they only had one place. It was this family giving money. It happened last year. All these nonprofits were panicking, so they don't know what to do. So this is all tied together. But I want to get to not oil from Afghanistan. I want to talk about the Taliban and poppy. So what happened was poppy seeds, you guys know this from Wizard of Oz and stuff, and poppy makes you sleepy and all that. Well, it makes opium, right? So there's a huge opium trade in Afghanistan. The Taliban said, no more opium, we're stopping it. So all you farmers, because they had a lot of individual people farming poppy to sell, and that's how they made their living, they said, you can't do that anymore because we're in charge, you can't do it. This is a couple years ago. So what we found out later is that the Taliban actually cornered the market on opium supply, stored a ton of opium, stopped the production, the price went up, they made a ton of money selling it to Russia or the global market. That's the market in action. Although it's a crummy result because we had people out there fighting, they're fighting against the people selling on the open market. And so the Taliban said stop it because of reasons, political reasons. Really, it was market reasons. This happens a lot. That's manipulation of the market. Okay, so price ceilings and price floors. Look at the saying in the class. Okay, so if you have a price ceiling of 50 cents a loaf, what happens? Unintended consequences of that. Remember, the price ceiling is that maximum price. So let's take a look. Typical size of the loaf, manufacturers will try to maintain profits by reducing the loaf size. We see this now. We talked about the dollar store a little bit ago. We see that people downsize products. This is really insidious. Keep the same price. They actually say extra. They're marketing. They're saying extra whatever. So extra loaf. Like that. And we read the word extra, fat-free. That was a big one like 20 years ago, right? Then Olera came out, or Olestra. and then people had all these problems. You guys know this? What happened? I think Alestra came out, fat free, don't have fat. Well, now we know fat is integral to how we have a healthy diet. But Alestra came out, people started eating all this stuff, potato chips with Alestra. And then anal leakage happened. I'm not kidding. I mean, millions of people had problems with anal leakage. Alestra disappeared overnight because nobody's going to buy that. If you're in the store, my son would have a field day with it. But besides that, so this is the problem if you're trying to do things. Okay, so change the row size. Because we want to purchase more, producers will manufacture less. We know what happens on our graph. That's a shortage of supplies. Okay, because we want to buy more because it's 50 cents. Cheap. If it's expensive bread, nope, no one's going to buy it. You can't compete. It's focaccia. I'm with you.
I've made it a
Delicious.
few times and it's not great, but it's still so good. Like even how poorly I can make it, like it's still so good.
How much olive oil do you use?
It's been a couple years. I don't know.
Yeah, I when I make it, I found that the more olive oil I use, the better, and it ends up just being a sponge. I bring up the olive oil and I just drink it. And you gotta have the right kind of olive oil too. I'm high maintenance on my olive oil. So there's a great place in Italy, small little place, and they make their own stuff. We should just do a field trip. Yeah.
It smells so good. You're
I didn't
really
even
hungry.
say
Stop.
chocolate. Where did you say the chocolates were?
Belgium.
He's like, oh, yeah, so.
No, my wife and I were at this place in Italy. We had lunch. It was a winery, but they made their own bread and they made their own stuff. And she gives me the car keys and says, "Here you go." I said, "Okay, I know what's about to happen." And she's just wine tasting. Wine tasting.
Why isn't that like other countries, like their food is better quality?
Less processed than ours.
Well,
Yes, and it has like less,
Well,
less
there's GMOs.
sugar, like.
well, we can make some great food. We can really do it. We're used to really sweet stuff in America. And the reason for that is there's a long story about what happened in the 60s. And then the sugar becoming cane sugar, and then corn sugar. And then it's a long story how the market happened. But we're used to really sweet stuff. But we can really have some fantastic food. Have you guys ever eaten at Yellow City street food?
No, I just went
It's
there.
fantastic.
It was, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
What's
It's like more, it's vegan, but it's
They have some vegan
there's
stuff.
some vegan stuff, but it's like really high and it's a small little kind of I mean, it's not a like, elegant building or anything, but it's very.
On the other hand, in the Emerald Club, one year they hired a chef who came here from Washington, D.C. So I had dinner with he made me dinner, made my wife. I met him at a place with his wife. So my wife went to their house, dinner, fantastic, just absolutely fantastic. And he quit that job in 2 weeks. Because the Amarillo Club said you're going to use frozen seafood, frozen this. And why is that? He was upset. He said, I don't cook that way. The reason is because the margin is too high to maintain the Emerald Club. If you guys have not known what I'm talking about, it's downtown. It's way top of the building.
Chase Cook?
Yeah, the Ridge, yeah.
I've been there before.
Have you? Yeah. You could views and stuff.
Yeah,
So, but anyway, what happens is you have to pay a fee just to be a member. And then you have to spend a certain amount of money. And economically, this makes no sense. Why would you do that? So they have other reasons you do it, for social reasons or whatever it is. But they cheated on the food a little bit with that chef because they had to make the money to pay for the other stuff at the place. Versus in like Yellow City, where you go and you think, oh, that's expensive for a burger. It comes with a small burger, but it's awesome.
It was.
Yeah, you pay. You end up paying for it.
One person. I paid for my friend because I couldn't eat. It was like $31.
Yeah.
The whole price goes to the food, not the experience of like the membership and like the upkeep of the
Right.
building and the
That's
fancy stuff like that. You see the experience part of it.
That's
Part
right.
of it.
That's right. So people will pay for that.
Funny story, like how I got, because you're not like allowed unless you're like a member. So me and my dad were walking, we decided to go up there, right? So I just pretend that I was like from England, and I used an accent, and the lady was so nice. She's like, oh, she.
I didn't know how to relax. I just came here from the island, yeah. I went there one time, I had a meeting. I was wearing jeans. The guy comes, sir, you can't wear jeans in the main dining room. And I said, what kind of place is this? It's ridiculous. So I stood up and made a statement, but and where I am, I sat down and put my napkin on my lap. I tucked it into I had some of the tablecloth tucked in, so I stood up. I'm done with this place. I walked out, just the whole tablecloth with me. Yeah, that was an awesome episode of my sitcom life. So, but I made a statement. I should have done it the other way around, right? But instead, I took all the plates with me, the bowl, they all fell on the ground, made a big noise.
You did it on purpose?
Oh no.
Oh, you just forgot.
Yeah, because I was such a dork, and so I just kind of did it. So anyway, okay, so we talk about price ceilings. So price ceiling of $2, but our equilibrium price is $1 here, so we can see what happens. And you'll see this in the textbook, so that you'll have different things that the point of what I'm trying to express here, because I really want to get you a little review coming up. It's going to help you a lot more than this, is that when you have a price floor and a price ceiling, and if they are binding, there are results and consequences that happen from that binding. And the binding just means you have to do it. So rent control, or here there's a shortage. In New York, there is a series of buildings from the 70s under rent control. And these are price, the government said you cannot charge more than, say, $700 a month. So what happened is people would just wait and wait and wait to get into those apartments, and you're locked in. So people would just read the obituaries. And when someone would die, it would be 100 people lined up to go look at this apartment to get it because it was still under price control. And the reason it was under price control was because the prices in New York are skyrocketing and people couldn't afford to live there. So, and same thing happened in Boston. Now the opposite is happening in San Francisco and in Austin right now. There are no price ceilings, no price floors. And so the cost right now, the current numbers, I think I told you, is 35% the first day of class. I think it's now around 50%. Valuations have increased 50% in Austin on houses in the past year. That's insane. That means if you bought a $100,000 house, you sell it for $150,000 after not even living there for a year. You make $50,000.
That's a lot.
Yes, it's crazy. So Austin is insane right now. So you see what happens in these situations, what happened in San Francisco. San Francisco, the Bay Area, I ran a company out of Redwood City one time. I had some people working for me. And I was paying $50,000 a month just for their office space. And it was for 5 people. And that office space was a house, and they lived there. They all lived together. Really. Have you seen, what's the TV show about the coders? And I can't remember the name of it now. Silicon Valley, yeah. It was exactly like that. And I thought, well, that's stupid. And that was before the housing market took off. So what happens is school teachers teaching 4th grade can't afford to live in San Francisco, so they have to come in from other areas. So they have to drive 2-3 hours in the morning to get to work. So teachers don't do that.
At least it's not as bad as New York.
So New York was bad, but the valley, there in San Francisco, where New York was here, the valley was this. It was terrible. The worst property rates, I believe right now, and you guys could hold me to this, I think it's Tokyo. The most expensive property in the world. Maybe Shanghai. And that gets back to communist China and the rates and the market rates. So real quick, I'm going to rip you off on that chapter. There's a lot to talk about, but it's in the book. So the illumination that I can give you on that stuff is what we just talked about, and where the market fits and different things. But we only have a little bit of time, and I really want to go through this. And let's see. Denisa. Oh, there she is. All right. You guys want to say hello? Say hello.
Buckingham Palace.
Buckingham Palace?
The most expensive property in the world.
Oh, is it one property? Yeah, I guess that would be right.
$2.9 billion.
That's crazy.
Are you talking about the property or the property rate?
Well, I was talking about the rates in the general geographic location, but I hadn't even thought about Buckingham Palace as the most expensive property. In general terms, so you're looking it up, so what do you know? What did you find out?
No, I'm not sure I'm saying it right. It's
Okay.
in Europe.
Monaco?
Monaco.
Okay, I'll buy that too. Monaco,
And then
yeah.
Hong Kong, and then New York,
Okay,
and then Tokyo.
okay.
So you mean to tell me like Hong Kong, like, you know, like the US dollars, right?
Is what?
You know, our dollars, right? The US dollars. I thought our US dollars was a little bit, like I said, like it comes with the money thing. I thought our money was more valuable.
No, there isn't money that's more valuable or less valuable. It's only money relative to other money.
Oh, okay.
So,
So if I were to supposedly, hypothetically, to live in Hong Kong, how much US dollars would it be?
a lot.
I'm just asking.
So you can do a rate calculation, but from Amarillo, Texas, the multiplier, I think from Amarillo to Hong Kong, you probably have to have a multiplier of 5-6 times what you make to just live in whatever in Hong Kong. To give you an example, when I was in Hong Kong, I had a meeting with some people. A good friend of mine lives in Shenzhen, which is right across the bay. And he lives in a complex, apartment complex that has 40,000 people in one complex.
Whoa.
And they're these giant towers. And he just lives in a small little area with his 3 kids and his wife. It's a very tiny apartment. This friend of mine, he had a parking space. The parking space cost him $500,000 for a year to rent the parking space in the place where he had it. Now, he would park his car, and then there was a guy there who would wash his car, and he got all that stuff. You get that for $500,000 a year. But
What's the current, like in our currency equivalent, or in their currency, or?
that was in US, USD.
That's a lot.
Oh yeah.
I would be holding some bread.
Okay, so real quick, since I'm now going to give you a quick review. Opportunity cost, here's a question. I worked hard on these pictures too. Bunch of Simpsons jokes. All right, question. Frozen yogurt shop, a coupon for free yogurt. The choices are raspberry, lemon, chocolate, caramel. The first choice is chocolate. The second choice would be lemon. That's your preference. What's the opportunity of choosing raspberry? What's the opportunity cost of choosing raspberry? Remember the opportunity.
To have chocolate, and that opportunity to have chocolate, right?
Yes, exactly right. So your opportunity cost is the cost of giving up the next most valuable thing. The most valuable thing is chocolate. Then lemon. So the opportunity cost of choosing raspberry is giving up chocolate.
Would it not be all of them? Would it not be?
It would if all of them were if you didn't
But
care.
his first choice was chocolate.
Yeah, if you didn't care, it'd be all of them. But yeah, so the important thing here is what opportunity cost is versus your next best choice.
Oh, okay.
I will tell you, you might see this exact question on the test. Okay, Hester operates a car. See again, it's just for you guys. I found that one. If you haven't seen Breaking Bad, sorry. So great. Car wash, $10 a car wash. Based on her knowledge of operations, the 100th car in a day costs $9.95 to wash. If she takes additional business, the 101st car will cost her $10.05 to wash, based on whatever calculations. We do this in micro. Question is, does she take the additional business? So you might see answers like no, no, no. But why wouldn't she do it? Is it because she has hidden costs that exceed the value of 1005? We don't know that. We don't know what the hidden costs are. She's not taking any additional business. It's no, because the cost, she's not making any more money from the cost of one additional unit. That's marginal thinking that we talked about. So $10.05, it costs $10 per car to wash. She loses 5 cents on that car. That's the next marginal difference is 5 cents. Remember, it's the difference. So no, she doesn't do it, but the no for the reason is important. And the reason is the cost of the additional unit costs her money. Good? So like I said, people freak out on graphs. So here it is. What point on this curve shows that productive resources are not fully employed? At what point are we not using the right resources? We're not using them to the best we can.
Amen.
Exactly. Remember, that's very good. Production possibility frontier is this. That's optimal. This is impossible, and this is inefficient. This is where you're exactly efficient 100%. Yes?
So when you give like a question I would answer if it was you, like what's the question that you would see if it was so the answer would be
Yeah, so the question would be that. You would see the graph, and then you get multiple choice. The multiple choice say point A, point B, point A, point B.
I'm saying like, okay, so you know this question,
Yeah.
the answer is A obviously. So I'm asking, would you give us an example of another question, but it would be the answer you
Oh, maybe if I'm nice, I'll do that right now. Okay, so
Nice. I'm so thankful.
what is point B on this graph out of these choices? So test taking 101. If you don't know, get rid of the stuff that makes no sense. If you guys are interested later on this semester on how to be really efficient in studying and how to memorize things so you don't have to cram, I can show you techniques that I've used. By the way, just to give you some background, my SAT scores, perfect. My law school admission scores, perfect. My graduate doctor scores, perfect. And it's not because I'm a genius, it's because I know how to cheat. Not cheat like get the answers, know how to hack your memory. If you guys want to learn this through the semester, I'm happy to teach you how to do it. There are specific ways you can do things where you can read that chapter, know stuff, and do it in 10 minutes. And then you can go and watch Netflix. I'm not kidding. So I do it all the time. So here, if you guys want to do that, let me know. I don't want to waste class time if you don't want to do it. But if you do, let me know. Or just remind me as the semester goes on. So in this graph, first of all, we know this is inefficient. We know it. So it can't, so we know that if point B is an inefficient point, well, B is not in here. So we know that can't be true. Is it the equilibrium?
No.
There's no equilibrium point. Is it unattainable? Well, that's over here. So,
It's A.
yeah, it's A. So even if you have to cross out the ridiculous stuff, do it. It's better to have a 50-50 chance than it is to have a 12% chance to get the right answer. What's point E? Yeah, it's unattainable. Okay, just what we talked about.
Oh, so then you were wrong. So you're wrong on the A.
No, A is right, that's for E.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's a different point. Like I said, the probability of you seeing this exact question is very high. Maybe 100%. But people freak out on graphs. There are a lot of questions on concepts, right? Just know the concepts. Everything is open book. You just don't have a lot of time. People freak out when you hit the graphs. That's why I want to spend time here. And we have okay. It's online, and the exam opens in 15 minutes. And you have until Sunday night to take it. Don't forget your inquisitive work, please, because the deadlines happen, but the deadline for the test is Sunday night.
This Sunday?
Yes.
Okay.
Opens right after class, and you have a few days.
2 hours test or hours?
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours?
Okay? Any questions about that stuff? Real quick. Yes.
come back to it or not?
You have 2.5 hours. If you want to come back to it, you have 2.5 hours. But that starts and stops.
Oh,
So you can always leave, but your clock is ticking.
That's
So
So you might as well do it.
you better do it. Yeah. Because I put this for you. So, not for you, for the general. Just for you. Okay, real quick. If you need to go, go. But I'm going to go through a couple more of these real fast. What is the statement that best describes the opportunity cost evident in the production possibilities frontier for the accompanying graph? All right. So here, the opportunity cost is constant because the PPF is a straight line. All this means is that the opportunity cost here is the same as here, is the same as here, because that's I'm giving out that I'm getting in return. So remember, all the way down, if the lines differ, it would be a different issue, but we haven't talked about that in class. So really, the only thing we talked about is C anyway. So that's the only option. Okay, remember this guy? You're not going to see him on the test, but you'll see the question. The full employment and efficient use of all resources a society produces, and on the production possibilities frontier. Exactly what we just talked about. If you're completely efficient, you're going to be on the line, on the frontier line. You're not going to be here. You can't be here unless you get that hoe that we talked about. The farming implement. So you're on this line. And that is on the production possibilities frontier, and that is 100% efficient. All right?
Yeah.
How do we show opportunity cost? So how do we show, I just did it. I just did it with my hand. How do we demonstrate it? Wait. I'm moving from point B to point A.
What point?
Well, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's going from efficient to completely not efficient.
Yeah, so
that's not
would it be
opportunity.
like point B to
It's for, if you go
Or-
E to C.
wait, what? Oh,
It's for,
well, you're going this way, so I thought it was like.
Either way, you're on the curve, so that's how we show it.
Oh, okay.
All right. The inefficient points are, I don't know who said E. I think everything inefficient in here. It's just reiterating. Oh, okay. So point E, I don't know, man. Where have you been in the past 5 minutes? All right. Unemployed resources. Yeah, it's the same. Inefficient, and you're not using resources. The same thing. One would need more hours in the day to attain what point? Yes, that's right. That's the hoe problem. Okay, supply and demand. According to this graph, price of $10, the equilibrium quantity is, yeah. Okay. The demand curve. So this, you need to think a little bit. Ooh, we're running out of time. Like I said, if you need to go, go. If the price of pot point increases, what do you expect to happen to the market? So you,
The quantity increases.
okay.
And
Quantity,
supply increases.
yes.
And then the quantity demanded decreases.
Okay.
Because people can't, they don't want to.
Good. This is good. This is exactly right. So what does that mean to any of these options? What do you mean this? So the demand curve starts to shift. So if you just visualize it, you just draw it really fast, and you can draw shift, and you just visualize what happens. If the price goes up, that curve has to shift because of that is the shift. Remember we talked about that the price changes and then the shift changes. So if you get stuck, just do it real quick on a piece of paper and just do it. Just do the X and Y and then draw a line and then think, okay, if that price is $5 this and it goes up, this moves, what does this do? And you'll just see it. It works. It really does. Okay, the quantity and price combinations, what represents equilibrium? This is an easy one. So yeah, so 30 and 100. There is a, okay, I'm just going to go through it. Okay, so there's a shortage of 100 units. You see this here at $20. Shortage of 100 units. Right there, under equilibrium. We could spend a long time thinking, how come it's not here? But that was equilibrium. So that drops to here. That's a short reason why.
It's from the equilibrium,
Yeah.
that's where the shortage goes.
That's
From
right.
the equilibrium.
Yes. Okay, the supply curve. I worked hard on this picture too, by the way.
Oh, Adventure Time.
As a matter of fact, I was doing a chat message with a group of people in our code club, and someone said something, and I said, this picture's great, and just copied and pasted it, and I said, that was a fast response. I said, I'm working on econ, I'm just using my picture. Cost of lemons falls, that's a shift to the right. Again, you just picture this. All right, I'm going to take one, this is what we just talked about. What is consumer surplus? Well, we know that, that's B. Social welfare is B and C. We just went through it. And then, of course, on the supply and demand curve, whereas consumer surplus, I'm going to show this so we can refer back to it. But we know what this is because we've done it. It's below the demand curve and above the equilibrium price. So below the demand curve and above equilibrium, and that's this. So just refer to a picture if you need to, but below and then above. That's the triangle. There's a lot of math in this to determine it, and we're gonna look at this here right now, real quick. This is the scary part. I'm gonna give you the answer. You ready? But I want to show you why the answer is the answer. And you're gonna look at it. You're gonna say, "What are you smoking?" And you hope you never have to do this again. But this is important because it's why we have triangles. So the market for used droids. These are called the functions, the demand function and supply function. You'll see this in the textbook. Don't worry too much about it, but it is part of the review, and I really want to show you what it means, because if you are interested in economics down the road, you're saying, I really kind of like this stuff that we're talking about, this is where it kind of goes. So these are functions. Now, what does this mean? What do these things mean? And the question is, what's the equilibrium quantity? How much are we going to have at equilibrium for the droids based on these functions? Well, first of all, these functions are based on this stuff right here. These are called the linear supply function, where it's the quantity supplied, the quantity and the price, and then there's a part in this, the plus or the minus, that tells us the slope, and it looks like this. So in this function right here, that minus 82p, p is the price. So 82, that minus means this is going this way, like I talked about at the beginning of class. It's a negative slope. If you kind of remember that, the positive is the positive slope. If your quantity supplied is a negative slope, that's a problem in your business. We could do a demonstration of that, but that just means bankruptcy, really. So if you understand this stuff and you're really operating a business, you will be greatly successful. So that's what that means in terms of what the math is. But what's the calculation? What we need to do is we need to make quantity demanded equal quantity supplied. They have to balance. Remember, we're going for equilibrium. That means we have to balance two sides of an equation. If you remember equations when you're kids or whatever. So we take QD and QS and put them together. So that's the stuff in the red box. So 233560, that's this part equals this part. It has to equal because we're going to make that the equilibrium point. We're going to add 50 to both. This is the balance, right? This is old school stuff. Add 50 to both sides because I want to get rid of this 50. So I do that. Add 50, add 50. So that's gonna cut itself out. I did step by step to show you on the screen. And I'm sorry if it's reductive. If this is too simple, if I'm talking down to you, I apologize. But sometimes I find that it's better if I do it step by step to really show you. But anyway, I'm adding 50, so it cuts this out. So I end up at 233560 plus 50 is 233610 minus 82p. The price equals 18p. This is done. Then we have to get rid of the p's. So add 82p to both sides to balance it. So here it's this negative 82p positive, that cuts that out. So it's 23360 equals 100p. Then I divide by 100 right here. That gets me the price is $2,336. I'm going to say galactic credits in a minute because nerd. But anyway, that's the p. We know the price. Now to get to the equilibrium quantity, we plug the price into P up here at the top. And to do that, it looks like this. So quantity demanded, and I pop it into P, which is up there in the formula. That's the equation. Do the math here, and that equals to the quantity demanded is 42,000 droids. I'm rounding up. It was 41,999.8 or something. So 42,000 droids. The important thing is, since this must balance, you can prove your math. So we do the other way around and do the second quantity supplied, same thing, ends up with the same stuff. So the answer here is the equilibrium price is 2336, the equilibrium quantity is 42,000 droids, enough to go back into battle and fight Obi-Wan Kenobi one last time. Okay, the probability of that question being worth 3 points on the test is high. Now you know the answer, but I hope you at least understand the logic for the rationale. That should have spent 30 minutes just going through. I'm sorry I'm ripping you off. It's just a lot. And then we start talking about interesting stuff, and I can't stop because this what class is. Like I said, you read the chapter. Please let me know if you have any problems. If you have any questions, send me an email. I'm around. I won't be around through the weekend. I'll be riding a bicycle in some mountains, but still, exams due Sunday night.
You'll be around, just not around here.
That's it. That's the way of putting it. I'll be around, not for you suckers. All right. Good luck.
So on that quiz, whatever, since you have the assignments posted for the whole year, can we do them ahead of time so they're done? Or do
An inquisitive? Yes.
Yeah. So we could do all of them.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Man, I'm gonna need some internships or anything to get some whatever you're talking about.
Okay.
I'm trying to do a study law and all that.
Mhm.
And I got some more stocks, so I'm trying to run the business. I took your class just for this experience, right?
All right.
You teaching you a little something, taking notes.
Okay, good. Well, we have to talk about what you want to do. Maybe I can.
Look, yeah, I'll get back to you.
I like your outfit. Sunday, Saturday.
We had a question. So, you want to know, you said you drive an electric vehicle, right?
Yep.
What kind of electric vehicle?
So I